Ikena's mother and sister came with some kinsmen, demanding for Ikena's properties, threatening to throw Adora out of the house. Adora ordered the servants to boil hot water with pepper, and they poured it on them. Property kill you there. After everything I went through, you have the guts to still show your face here. Adora yelled as they all fled and never came back. Once upon a time, there lived a woman named Adora. She was married to a very rich man named Ikena. Ikena was a very wealthy man. He was known all over Aba. He owned most of the plantations and factories and other big businesses in Aba. Ikena was envied by the people. They all wished to be like him. Adora was a well-respected woman in the society also. She helped a lot of people and she was a compassionate woman. Adora and her husband had been married for years, but they had no child. She looked for help everywhere, but no one was able to help her, as the cause of her childlessness was unknown. Ikena had asked her to stop worrying that they would have children when the time was right. Nene, Ikena's mother, constantly humiliated her because of this same issue. One day, Adora heard a knock on the door. When she opened the door, she saw that it was her mother-in-law. She smiled, but before she could hug her, Nene gave her a dirty slap. "You barren woman, when will that dry womb of yours ever bear a child? Or is it your plan to make my only son fatherless? Your evil plans will not work," she said to Adora. Adora began to cry, but before she could say anything, Ikena's sister Ogechi came and added salt to the injury. "Don't mind her, Mama. All she knows how to do is spend my brother's money. Ordinary child now she cannot give birth to," Ogechi said. Adora was hurt by their words. "Mama, it is God that gives children, and He will give us at the appointed time." Nene cut her short before she could finish. "I blame my son. If he had agreed to take another wife, we wouldn't have been having this conversation. Your things would have been thrown out of this house long time ago," Nene said to Adora as she went with Ogechi to see Ikena in his room. That night, Adora brought up the issue to Ikena again, but Ikena dismissed it as usual. One day, Adora told Ikena that she was tired of the marriage. She asked Ikena for a divorce, but Ikena begged her to give him some time, promising her that his family would never bother her again. Few days later, Ikena told Adora that they should adopt a child in order to take away the shame of the childlessness. "I do not have a problem with adoption, but do you think your family is stupid? They will never accept an adopted child from us," Adora said. "Yes, I know that. All you have to do is pretend that you are pregnant. Once the child is given to us, we will announce that you have put to bed," Ikena said to Adora. Adora agreed because it was a brilliant idea. She was so happy and she went along with the plan. Few weeks later, she started vomiting so as to convince even the servants in the house. Few months later, she began to put pieces of clothes in her belly. Everyone who saw her congratulated her on her pregnancy. When her mother-in-law saw her, she was so happy. "Finally, you've made me proud. My son will soon be a father and me a grandmother," Nene said in excitement as she went into the kitchen to make fresh pepper soup for Adora. Adora continued with the plan just like they have discussed. Months later, Ikena asked Adora to come to a particular place. When she got there, Ikena handed over a newborn baby boy. Adora was so happy. The baby was so cute. She removed all the pieces of clothes she had tied to her body, and they went home later that evening with the child. When they got home, they announced the arrival of their child. Nene and Ogechi rushed to see the child. They danced, sang, and showered Adora with love and gifts. Nene did Omugo, as Adora had no mother. Life began to make sense once more to Adora. She became happier than she had ever been. The child was named Obiora, and he looked just like Ikenna. Obiora grew up to be very handsome. He attended the best school in the village, and he became Adora's pride. One day, when Adora was going to the market, Obiora begged to follow her. On their way back, something strange happened. A mad woman came out of nowhere and began to attack Adora. "You thief! Give me back my child!" She said this repeatedly as she continued to drag Obiora away from her. Adora shouted for help, and the villagers intervened. It was a tough scene. The mad woman became aggressive, insisting that Obiora was her child. The villagers quickly tied the mad woman, but she kept on shouting and crying. Adora asked who the mad woman was. Some villagers told her that her name was Uloma. She was a very beautiful girl, very respectful, but few years back, she became mad after her mother was struck by a strange illness. But what was even more shocking was that she was pregnant. And one day, she had a child, but no one knew who took the baby. She had been roaming round the village looking for her child, the villagers said to Adora. Adora was shocked by the revelation, and she quickly left with Obiora. Throughout that day, she couldn't eat or sleep. She paced round worried. What if truly she is the mother of my child? Did Ikenna steal a mad woman's child? I thought Obiora was from the orphanage. And why does Obiora look so much like Ikenna? This man obviously knows something he's not telling me. She continued to pace round as she waited for her husband to come home. When Ikenna came home that night, she gently approached him as she had become suspicious. Adora asked Ikenna where Obiora was adopted from. Ikenna was surprised at the question. After a while of silence, he finally responded. He was adopted from an orphanage, Ikenna said shakingly. Adora asked him the name of the orphanage. The orphanage from the city. I doubt if you will know it, Ikenna responded. Obim, don't mind my silly questions, Joe. I just wanted to know so that once in a while we'll be sending support to them. Anyway, let's forget about it since it is in the city and it's quite far, Adora said as she continued to notice Ikenna's body language. Ikenna breathed a sign of relief and they both went to bed. That night, Adora could not sleep. She knew something was wrong because Obiora was just born when she first heard him. And it was not possible for an orphanage to just give him up for adoption the very moment he was born. She felt betrayed. What if truly Obiora is the mad woman's child? That means Ikenna had an affair with her. But why will he do such a thing? Why can't he just marry a second wife instead, if he thought I was incapable of bearing children? Why have an affair with a mad woman? This man is keeping me in the dark, she continued to think, as the night became day. The next morning, Adora took Ikenna's picture and went to see Uloma the mad woman. When she saw her, she showed Ikenna's picture to her. Immediately, Uloma began to shout and cry. Evil man, he took my child. He stole my baby. Evil man, run away from him. Evil man. Adora took the picture back as Uloma continued to scream and cry. Adora confirmed her suspicion that truly Obiora was Ikenna and the mad woman's child. Adora was in shock. She couldn't figure out how her husband would be intimate with a mad woman. Did Ikenna sleep with a mad woman, or did this woman run mad after the encounter with him? She was confused and devastated. She did not go back home immediately. Rather, she went to her best friend's house, as she was the only one she could trust. Ugo and Adora were childhood friends, and they were like sisters, as Adora had no family except Ikenna's. The moment she arrived at Ugo's house, Ugo knew something was wrong. Her eyes were swollen as a result of crying. "One name, what is wrong? What happened? Why are you crying?" Ugo held Adora close as she continued to cry. Ugo waited for her to stop crying before she asked her what the problem was again. "My husband has killed me, Ugo. Ikenna is now having an affair with a mad woman. They even have a child together." She told Ugo everything as she continued to cry. Ugo was shocked at the revelation as she continued to console Adora. "This is strange. You mean it was his idea for you to fake the pregnancy, and he gave you Obiora?" Ugo said as she was still in disbelief. The both of them were still in confusion as they did not know why Ikenna would do such a thing. Ugo advised Adora to follow her to the church as her spiritual father was very powerful. But Adora declined because she was not a Christian. Ugo persuaded her for a while, but she stood her ground. Ugo came up with another plan. "When you get home, tell your husband that you just came back from the hospital and that you are pregnant. Whatever his response is, come back and tell me. I am suspecting him for something, but I cannot tell you one name because if I do, you will not be able to comport yourself," Ugo said to Adora. Adora agreed and they both hugged each other as Adora took her leave. That night, when Ikenna came back home, Adora did exactly what Ugo had said. She went to Ikenna and told him that she was pregnant. Immediately Ikenna heard this, he flared up in anger and fear. "That is impossible. You cannot be pregnant. You no longer have a womb," he said as he began to throw things in the room. Adora knew something was wrong. She took to her heels and ran as fast as she could to Ugo's house, without no one knowing her whereabouts. When she got to Ugo's house, she narrated everything to her as she continued to shake. "Ada, your husband is a ritualist. That is the only answer to this problem." Adora was in shock. "Please take me to your church. I must put an end to this," Adora said to Ugo, and she promised to do so the next morning. Ugo was a very strong Christian. She took Adora's hand and they began to pray all through the night. The next morning, just when they were about going to the church, someone ran to Ugo's house and told them that Ikenna was confessing. Ugo and Adora rushed to the mansion just to see Ikenna on the floor, being tormented, confessing to using Adora's womb to get all his wealth, causing her to be childless. He confessed to killing some people and also making Uloma run mad. Everyone was shocked. Adora began to scream and cry. Ikenna confessed to a lot of evil acts, and after the confession, he stripped himself naked and began to roam around as a madman. Immediately, Uloma's madness vanished and she became well again. Ikenna's mother and sister buried their heads in shame and quietly went away. Ugo stayed back and consoled Adora. The villagers sympathized with her for all she went through. After a few days, Adora gave Obiora back to Uloma, his biological mother, and promised to be visiting him often. Uloma was so grateful for her help and they became friends. After a few months, Ikena's mother and sister came with some kinsmen demanding for Ikena's properties, threatening to throw Adora out of the house. Adora ordered the servants to boil hot water with pepper and they poured it on them. Property kill you there. After everything I went through, you have the guts to still show your face here. Adora yelled as they all fled and never came back. Adora went for deliverance. She began her charity organization where she met her new husband few years later. They had 2 children and they lived happily ever after. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to this story. If you want us to make more videos, hit on the like and subscribe button. And do not forget to share this video as people may learn a lot from it. We love and appreciate you. Bye. A long time ago, there lived a very beautiful couple called Kalu and Ronke. They were the pastors at a local church in Ijebu-Ode. Kalu and Ronke were very peaceful people in the community and people loved them. Ronke struggled with childbearing. She had an undetectable condition which made it difficult for her to conceive. Her mother-in-law became a thorn in her flesh, constantly calling her names for not being able to have a child. This almost drove Pastor Kalu and Ronke into depression. Kalu's mother was constantly disturbing him to take a second wife and send Ronke out of his house. Mama, I cannot do that. I love my wife so much, and when the time is right, we will have children of our own. Kalu said to his mother, "Is it when you become very old, you will start talking about children? Perhaps I must have been dead by then. You are my only child, and it is very important that you start bearing children," Mama said to Kalu as she began to cry. That night, Kalu could not sleep. He questioned God on why he could not have children of his own. Even when he prays for couples at his church to conceive and God answers them. Why is our own case different? Kalu cried with Ronke that night. Ronke kept her faith and they continued to pray, hoping that one day their prayers would be answered. One day, when Ronke was coming from the market, she suddenly fainted. The people around rushed her to the nearest hospital before informing Kalu at the church about what had happened. Later that day, the doctor announced to them that she was pregnant. They were so happy. At last, our prayers have been answered, Ronke joyfully said to her husband as they hugged each other tightly. That day was one of the happiest days of their lives. After Ronke was discharged from the hospital, they went home and shared the news with Mama. Mama was so happy. She danced all through the night as the atmosphere was filled with joy. Few months passed. Ronke's belly became noticeable. They announced it in church, and that was the beginning of unexpected favors. People began to shower them with favor, gifts, and all sorts of good things. Pastor Kalu and his wife Ronke moved out of their rented apartment into their own home. They bought a car. The church began to grow with speed. Their businesses began to expand. And the favors continued to flow in their home ever since Ronke conceived. The baby brought light into their home and their lives never remained the same. After a few months, Ronke went into labor. It was a tough battle where she lost a lot of blood, which almost claimed her life due to the complication. Ronke had a baby girl. That was the happiest day of their lives. Mama was filled with joy. She danced and praised God that day like she had never done before. The news of Pastor Kalu's newborn baby spread round the town and people were happy for them. After all these years, finally there is a cry of a baby in their home, some villagers said as they celebrated with them. After a few days, A ceremony was held for the child's naming, and she was named Ibukun. Ibukun was the apple of her parents' eye. Mama pampered her so much. She was loved by her family, who gave her everything she ever needed. Few years passed. Ibukun grew to be a very pretty girl. She attended the best school in the town. The family was living in love and happiness until Mama started with her persuasion again, demanding for a grandson. Kalu paid no attention to her, as Ibukun was enough for them, considering the complication Ronke had when she gave birth to her. I don't want to lose my wife, Mama. Please, stop asking for another child. We cannot give you what you want, Kalu pleaded with his mother. Mama did not let go. She constantly reminded Ronke of the need to give birth to a son, as girls will only end up in their husband's kitchen. Ronke was traumatized. The pressure kept getting worse each day until she finally succumbed to Mama's pressure. Okay, Mama. Even if I agree to have another child against my doctor's advice, how will I do that? Remember, I have difficulties conceiving, Ronke said to Mama. It won't be difficult this time, especially now that your womb is open. All you have to do is go and remove that birth control implant your doctor gave to you and start taking these herbs. I got it from a very powerful herbalist. A lot of people have testified to it. Don't worry, my daughter. Nothing will happen to you, Mama said to Ronke. The next day, Ronke went to a nearby clinic and removed the implant. She began to take the herbs as instructed by Mama, and truly, it did not take time before she became pregnant. Kalu was shocked at the news because he knew Ronke was on birth control. Ronke hid everything from Kalu, saying the conception was a miracle. Mama was happy. At last, there will be a son in this house. But what they did not know was that Ronke's body was not ready for another child. She had an ectopic pregnancy which also altered her entire system, and she became very sick even after terminating the pregnancy, hence leading to her death. Ronke died few months later. This news shook the entire town, and Kalu never remained the same again. Mama kept the secret to herself because Kalu would never forgive her if he found out. Kalu mourned her for a long time, partly blaming himself for not being more careful. Young Ibukun had to live a life without her mother. She would cry herself to sleep most nights, but that did not bring Ronke back. After a couple of years, Mama began to advise Kalu to take another wife so Ibukun could have a mother and siblings, but Kalu refused. Mama did not back down. She went into the town in search of beautiful women from good homes. She introduced them to Kalu, but Kalu turned them down. Mama was so desperate to have a grandson to the extent she came up with an evil plan. One night, as Kalu was eating, Mama added some drugs to Kalu's drink. After some time, Kalu could not control himself anymore. Mama took Ibukun with her to the quarters that night, leaving Kalu with half-naked Teju, a girl she wanted him to marry, on the same roof. Kalu could not help himself, and so he slept with Teju. When he woke up the next morning, he was shocked with what had happened. Kalu apologized to her, still confused how she got into his house that night. Mama was so happy that her plan worked. Few weeks passed, Teju became pregnant for Pastor Kalu. Kalu was angry and confused, but he had no choice than to marry her, as it will bring scandal to the church if they find out that he impregnated a girl he was not married to. Pastor Kalu married Teju, and they began to live under the same roof with Ibukun. But this was just the beginning of their doom. Few months later, Teju gave birth to a set of twin girls, Taiwo and Kehinde. All was well until she started maltreating Ibukun. When Mama found out about this, she took Ibukun away from the house. Ibokun and Mama began to live together. The people in the church did not like Teju, as she was no good, often putting Pastor Kalu in a bad light, causing members to leave the church. Pastor Kalu threatened to divorce her, but Teju begged him, promising him that she would change. But all this was just an act. Few months later, Teju became pregnant again and she gave birth to a boy named Tayo. Mama was so happy about the arrival of the child. But Teju did not allow her to touch him, talk more of taking care of him. Mama was heartbroken. She began to regret all she ever did in desperation. She decided to focus solely on raising Ibokun. Ibokun was a very happy and respectful child, and Mama was so proud of her. However, tragedy struck. Mama became very ill. She knew she was not going to make it, and so she gave Ibokun back to Kalu, making him promise that she would take good care of her before she died. But this promise was short-lived. Kalu died few weeks after, leaving Ibokun with her wicked stepmother Teju. She maltreated Ibokun, making her to do all the chores in the house. This went on for years. Ibokun became very used to it. Her step-siblings would sit doing nothing while Ibokun would be the one working, doing the chores and running errands. She stopped her education so as to be able to work and take care of the family. This was not a choice for her, as she was forced by her stepmother. Years passed. Ibokun grew up to be a very beautiful girl in the town. She was very hardworking and people loved her. Whenever she came to the market, people who knew her parents would quickly buy everything for her so she could go home and rest, not knowing another work was waiting for her at home. One day, when Ibokun was coming back from the market as usual, she was hit by a car. They quickly rushed her to the hospital and informed her stepmother. "What kind of trouble has this girl brought to me now?" Teju said in anger before going to the hospital to see her. On getting there, she saw Alhaji Kofi, a very rich man in the town. He told her that he was the one who hit Ibokun with his car. Alhaji Kofi compensated them and gave them some money for her upkeep. Teju collected the money. It was a huge sum of money. She had barely seen that amount of money before. Teju settled the hospital bill and they went home. When Ibokun was well, Alhaji Kofi came to the house to visit and see how she was doing. Teju saw this as an opportunity to milk him. "What if I pimp her to Alhaji? He would be giving us enough money as he's very rich," Teju said to her wayward daughters Taiwo and Kende, who were of no use to the society. The twins saw this to be a brilliant idea, as Alhaji was known for humanizing. When he was about leaving, Teju told him about the idea, also stating that Ibokun was a virgin. Alhaji Kofi was very happy at the arrangement. He asked Teju to bring Ibokun to his guest house that evening and also gave her a token of 50,000 naira. Teju was happy. "Imagine what I will get once the deal is concluded." She shared the excitement with her daughters. That night, Teju gave some fruit to Ibokun to take to Alhaji Kofi at his guest house. Ibokun, unaware of the fate that awaited her, she thought it was a way of appreciating the help he had been rendering when she was unwell. When she got there, she saw Alhaji Kofi sitting on the bed. She offered the basket of fresh fruit as instructed by her stepmother Teju. Alhaji Kofi smiled. "You are truly new. Sit on the bed with me," he said to Ibokun. Ibokun refused and begged to take her leave. But to her greatest shock, the door was locked. Ibokun began to knock, but no one opened, as it was locked from the outside by one of Alhaji Kofi's boys. Ibokun begged Alhaji Kofi to open the door, but before she knew what was happening, Alhaji Kofi started taking off his clothes. And with a twinkle of an eye, Alhaji Kofi forced his way on her, neglecting her pleading and screams. Ibukun wept all through that night, calling for help, but no one came to her rescue. When Alhaji Kofi left the room, Ibukun found a way and escaped through the window. Unaware of what her stepmother Teju had done, she ran home and began to cry. Teju pretended to care so that Ibukun could trust her, but she had other plans. That morning, she went to the same herbalist Mama used many years ago and asked her to give her the same medicine in higher dose. Every evening, she would pour it in Ibukun's water or food. After she was done eating or drinking, Ibukun would not be able to control herself anymore. She would run to Alhaji Kofi to satisfy her desires. This went on for a very long time. Teju became very rich. Ibukun begged Alhaji Kofi not to tell anyone, especially her family, not knowing it was all a setup to use her for prostitution. Soon, Teju began to give her the substance day and night after some other men showed interest in her. Ibukun began to go out with different men, unable to have control over her body and mind. It did not take long. The news of Ibukun, a pastor's daughter, spread around the town like wildfire. People started talking. Isn't that the pastor's daughter? Some sympathized, while others, who did not know who her parents were, condemned her. After some time, the wife of these men were fed up. They looked for Ibukun and gave her the beating of her life, threatening to kill her. Ibukun had no choice but to run for her dear life. She did not want her stepmother to know what had been going on, as she would make life a living hell for her. Ibukun secretly went into Teju's room. She saw some bundles of cash. Ibukun took enough to start life afresh, and she fled the town. She relocated to 2 towns away from hers. When Teju discovered that Ibukun had escaped, she was angry as her source of income was gone. She had collected advance payments from some men, the money from which Ibukun collected. When the men asked her back for their money, Teju refused to give them the remaining or sell her jewelries to pay them back. To Ibukun's greatest shock, her urge to sleep with men vanished. She became herself again. It was that moment it dawned on her that her stepmother Teju was the one behind everything. Ibukun felt betrayed and she vowed to get justice. She teamed up with some people from the NGO specialized in women's rights, abuse and trafficking, and they began their investigation. Meanwhile, one of the men Teju was owing money vowed to teach her a lesson. Him and his friends kidnapped Taiwo and Kehinde and had their way with them, leaving them at the brink of death. If she can use her stepdaughter for prostitution, her daughters should not be left out. They dropped some money on them and left them in front of their house. When Teju saw her daughters drenched in their own blood, almost lifeless, she screamed for help. Tayo quickly drove them to the hospital, where it was confirmed that truly the men had their way with them multiple times. Tayo asked Teju if she suspected anyone, and Teju, in her broken state, told him. Tayo, in anger and rage, went with his friends to avenge his sisters, but he met with his untimely death, as the man was no match for him. This news completely shattered Teju, and she immediately knew Nemesis had caught up with her. She was admitted in the same hospital as her children after her blood pressure almost rose to the roof. She started regretting all the evil she had ever done, from secretly seducing Pastor Kalu, killing him after he threatened to divorce her the second time, and all she did to Ibukun. But it was too late. Ibukun, the NGO, alongside with the police, had concluded their investigation, And with enough evidence, they arrested Alhaji Kofi and Teju, who later confessed the names of the rest men. They were all sentenced by the court of law to years in prison for their various crimes. Ibokun, though still traumatized, got justice. Unlike some siblings, she threw her stepsisters Taiwo and Kehinde out of the house as she was the sole proprietor of Kalu's estate, according to his will. Taiwo and Kehinde had no choice than to start working hard. The experiences they had with those men made them to realize what Ibokun was going through. They apologized to her and begged her for forgiveness. For Ibokun's own healing, she forgave them but kept her boundary. Few weeks later, Teju died in prison after her wicked heart was unable to take her punishment any longer. Ibokun found peace and she lived happily ever after with her newfound love, Pastor Ayomide, and her father's church regained its glory. The lesson from this story is that evil plans and actions often backfires and righteousness ultimately prevails. That is the end of our story for today. If you liked it, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you are always updated with our latest stories. We love connecting with you, so comment below and let us know where you are watching from. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in our next video. Let me tell you a story my grandmother once told me many years ago before she passed. It is a story about a very brave queen who sacrificed her life for her people. Her name was Queen Eden. A very long time ago in the great kingdom of Benin, there lived a king called Oriohene. After his death, the crown was passed to his cousin Akenuzama. But Akenuzama was very old, so he let the honor and responsibility to pass over to his son Idova. Idova was crowned and he assumed the title of Oba Ewuakpe. Oba Ewuakpe became an Oba who still had a father. But this was just the beginning of the turmoil. He married a large number of wives, which included Queen Eden. During that time, his mother died at Uselu. To give her a befitting burial and comfort in the afterlife, Oba Ewuakpe sent a great number of people to accompany her to the land of the dead. But this discovering provoked the people of Benin Kingdom and they rebelled against him. The rebellion penetrated the palace walls. Oba Ewuakpe's numerous wives abandoned the royal harem after the people rejected their husband as king. The queen's children, chiefs, and all the people in the palace were not spared. They flung open the gate of the palace and ran away. But one of them, called Queen Eden, stayed with her husband. She refused to return to her parents during that time. She pledged her loyalty to her husband and stayed with him. When Oba Ewuakpe realized his life as a king without his subjects was becoming unbearable, he journeyed to his mother's village in Ikoka and cried out to them, hoping for some empathy and recognition as the Oba of Benin. But he was met with series of blame and rejection. It turned out that the people of Ikoka only rendered help when there was something to gain, either materially or spiritually. Due to the condition in which Oba Ewuakwe came, the people of Ikoka rejected him because they had nothing to gain from him. Instead, he was a liability to them. Oba Ewuakwe cursed them for this before returning to his empty, deserted palace in Benin. Queen Iden felt pity for her husband. She took some of her valuables and sold them at the market. The money she made, she used it to summon a diviner to the palace and asked what was needed to be done in order to restore the peace in the kingdom. Oba Ewuakwe, burdened with unrest in his kingdom, approached the oracle seeking for a solution. The oracle, deep in trance, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of the gods.
The land is troubled, and the spirits demand a great sacrifice to restore balance and peace. The king must give up someone he loves dearly. Only this sacrifice and devotion will appease the gods and save the kingdom.
The oracle's proclamation hung heavy in the air. A dire and heart-wrenching decree that pierced the very soul of the king. It was a moment of profound realization that the path of salvation was fraught with sorrow and loss. As the oracle's words echoed, Queen Iden, who accompanied her husband in his quest for answer, stepped forward with her eyes filled with love and determination. Her eyes met with that of Oba Ewuakwe, and she knew in her heart what was needed to be done. "Let it be me," she declared, her voice steady and unwavering. "For the love I bear for you, my king, and for our people, I will give my life. Let my sacrifice be the balm that heals our land." Oba Ewuakwe refused, but despite his tears and pleas, Queen Iden's mind was made up. Her love for her husband and her people outweighed the fear of death. She pleaded with the king and talked him into accepting her decision. Queen Iden paid off the diviner, and then she and her husband went and bought all the necessary sacrificial items stated by the oracle. Before she was offered, Queen Iden requested from the king that her tomb be kept clean at all times, and on no account must anyone step foot on it, else such a person must be sacrificed as a symbol of honoring her memory. In a solemn and sacred ceremony, Queen Iden was led to the place of the sacrifice. With a smile, Queen Iden embraced her fate, knowing her spirit will forever watch over the kingdom she loved. As the earth closed over Queen Iden, a profound silence fell over the land. The gods, moved by her selfless act, blessed the kingdom with peace and prosperity. The chief and people, realizing the depth of the sacrifice, returned to Oba Ewuakwe with renewed loyalty and respect, and the kingdom thrived once more. Oba Ewuakwe was forever grateful and touched by Queen Iden's sacrifice. He fulfilled his promise and built a tomb adjacent to the palace in honor of her memory. This is the end of this story. If you were in Queen Iden's position, would you have made the same decision? Do you think the love she had for the king and her people was worth the sacrifice? I'd like to know your thoughts. Thank you for joining us today as we explore the captivating story of Queen Iden. What lesson can we draw from Queen Iden's courage? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more fascinating stories. Until next time, take care and see you soon. The doctor examined her and told him that she needed to have an emergency cesarean section to deliver the baby urgently. Over my dead body will my grandchildren be delivered prematurely. Let me inform my pastor about this, Obiageli said, as Ejike told the doctor not to proceed with the surgery. Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful girl named Temi. Temi was a very hardworking girl and she loved to play with children. All the children in the community loved her so much because of this. No day passed that she would not get sent snacks on her way from work. Whenever the children sighted her, they would run to her shouting, "Auntie Temi, Auntie Temi." Temi was an orphan who grew up with her evil auntie and her husband. But she ran away at the age of 17 when her auntie accused her of being a witch after her husband tried to rape her. Temi looked after herself and saw herself through school. She was the perfect example in the society, which made people proud of her. One day, when Temi was at work going about with her normal duties, a handsome man walked into her office. His name was Ejike, and he was the new supervisor of Temi's department. It did not take a long time for Temi and Ejike to fall in love, and they began to prepare for their wedding. Ejike's mother, Obiageli, did not like Temi because of her tribe. She opposed to the marriage, but Ejike stood his ground. Ejike was the only son of Obiageli. She spoiled him while growing up, to the extent he was nicknamed Mama's boy. Aside from his work, Ejike was not taught any other thing. Obiageli had the mindset that men are only supposed to provide financially and nothing more. And so, she forbade Ejike from partaking in the chores and left it for his sisters. While growing up, Ejike was very attached to his mother Obiageli, to the extent his late father felt uncomfortable. But Obiageli showered him with all her love and spoiled him in the process. Reason she hated Temi. Few weeks passed. Temi and Ejike got married and began to live together as a couple. Ejike showered Temi with love and money, making Temi the envy of the community. But things began to fall apart when Temi became pregnant. Due to the early morning sickness and hormonal change, she was not active as before. Some days, when she would come back from work tired with Ejike, he would still ask her to make difficult food like fresh soup and pounded yam for him to eat. This became too stressful for Temi. She would beg Ejike to eat other food from the freezer or fresh food like rice, but Ejike would refuse. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Temi's belly grew and she found out that she was pregnant with twins. They were so happy. One day, when Temi came back from work with her husband as usual, Ejike asked her to pound some yam. Temi was tired. She was not feeling well earlier at the office. She told Ejike to make some noodles for himself as she was not feeling too strong. But Ejike started nagging as usual. It is the job of a woman to take care of her husband. My mother was the one who cooks for us and my father. Every day, you are always tired. Are you the first woman to be pregnant? My mother gave birth to 6 children and she never complained. If you can't take care of me because of your stressful job, then quit. I make enough money for this family already. Ejike continued to nag as Tenny went into the kitchen to make him pounded yam. Few minutes later, Tenny screamed from the kitchen. When Ejike rushed down, he saw that she was spotting and having contraction. Ejike quickly rushed her to the hospital, where they were told by the doctor that she had a premature labor. The doctor advised her to be on bed rest for some days. You will not go back to that office until you put to bed, Ejike said to Temi. Temi pleaded with him, stating that she would lose her job if she does not resume work, but Ejike stood his ground. Few days later, Tenny was discharged from the hospital. That evening, Ejike asked Tenny to make some fresh food for him, that he was tired of eating from the restaurant. Temi refused and reminded him of what the doctor said. She begged him to let her employ a maid, but Ejike refused. My mother did not employ any maid. She took care of us by herself. Over my dead body will a house help come to this house. If you are tired of this marriage, let me know, Ejike continued to complain. That night, Tenny decided to challenge her husband for the first time. She insisted that she was not going to cook the food. The next day, Ejike refused to talk to Tenny or answer her greeting. This broke Tenny's heart, coupled with her hormonal change. Unknown to her, Ejike had informed his mother, Obiageli, about what had happened the previous evening, and she was on her way to their house. That evening, Tenny was shocked to see Ejike and his mother. She greeted them, but no one responded to her greetings. Temi was sad, but she quickly put herself together. Welcome, Mama. How was your journey? Mama, you did not tell me you were coming to visit us. I would have made proper preparation, Tenny said. So I should send an invitation to you before coming to my own son's house, Abi? Obiageli responded. Temi tried to explain what she meant, but Obiageli shut her up. Later that evening, Temi went into the kitchen and made some rice for her mother-in-law to eat, with the stew she had earlier brought out from the fridge. She served it on the dining table and asked her husband and mother-in-law to come and eat. When Obiageli saw the food, she started nagging, saying that Temi was supposed to make fresh soup and pounded yam for her, as that was the proper way to welcome an in-law. So it is true, you no longer cook proper food in this house. Is this how you were raised? You are supposed to make proper meal for your in-laws whenever they come visiting, Obiageli shouted at Temi. Temi apologized and tried to explain what the doctor had said, but Obiageli talked down on her before she even began. That night, Temi was crying. She tried talking to her husband, but he left her alone in the room. After 1 week, Temi's health was much better. She went to the market and got some food items and began to cook. When she began to pound, she felt a sharp pain and began to spot. She shouted for help, and her husband came and rushed her to the hospital. The doctor examined her and told him that she needed to have an emergency cesarean section to deliver the baby urgently. Over my dead body will my grandchildren be delivered prematurely. Let me inform my pastor about this, Obiageli said, as Ejike told the doctor not to proceed with the surgery. Few minutes later, Ejike and his mother began to pray. She rubbed some anointing oil on Temi's belly as Temi continued to cry in pain, insisting on the surgery. Ejike refused to sign the consent form, saying that his mother's pastor does not agree with it. About an hour later, Temi passed out. The doctor did not wait for consent anymore. He quickly rushed her to the theater and delivered the children. But unfortunately, one of the children did not survive. The doctor was angry as he told Ejike and his mother the news. Obiageli blamed it on the doctor, saying that both children would have been alive if he had waited for the pastor to perform some miracle. Maybe it's the will of God for that particular child to die, Obiageli said, as Ejike sadly nodded in agreement. Temi was still unconscious at the time. Few hours later, Temi regained consciousness. She asked for her children, but only got one. Temi began to cry and the doctor consoled her before Ejike and his mother began to blame her for passing out and not being strong enough. Temi was short of words and still in great shock. She had no family to call, and so she was stuck with Ejike and his mother. A couple of weeks later, she was discharged from the hospital. Few days after being discharged from the hospital, Obiageli told her to start bathing her daughter by herself. Temi was frustrated, coupled with her usual stress and the loss of her child. She went into depression. She would cry at any given time. The cry of her daughter made her angry. She hated herself and the entire world. Her husband would leave the house very early in the morning and come back late at night. There was no one to help her. Temi's depression worsened. She became very angry, unstable, and forgetful. Obiageli would nag her every time, reminding her of how she gave birth to 6 children without cesarean section. She begged Ejike to employ a nanny, but he refused. One day, as Temi was bathing her little daughter in the sink, she became lost in thought, forgetting that the water was still running. Her daughter began to cry, but Temi was absent-minded. Not too long, the water covered the child's entire body. This silence was unusual. Obiageli called Temi to ask what was wrong, but there was no response. As she went into the bathroom, she saw Temi staring at the window as her poor child began to drown. Obiageli quickly grabbed the baby and started shouting and accusing Temi of trying to kill her granddaughter. Temi snapped out of her thought. She had no idea what had happened. "Mama, how can you be accusing me of trying to kill my own child, my own flesh and blood?" Temi started crying. Obiageli did not stop. She took her phone and called everyone in her family. Ejike rushed home and joined his mother. Temi was confused. She had no recollection of what had happened. When Ejike's sister heard about the incident, they were shocked. They called Temi, and Temi denied the allegation. Obianuju, Ejike's elder sister, rushed down to their house just to see Temi in a very bad state. She asked Temi what was wrong, and Temi narrated everything that had been happening. Obianuju couldn't hold back her tears. "You mean you have been going through all this? Temi, you are suffering from postpartum depression, and this environment is too toxic for you. Go inside, pack your things, and that of the baby. You are coming with me," Obianuju said as she hugged her tightly. Obianuju went to Ejike and her mother and gave them a piece of their mind. "Mama, don't you know that all women are not the same? Do you want to kill her before she can have peace of mind in her own home? How heartless can you both be to treat her in this way? Are you this woman rapper? You stood there and watched our mother treat your wife badly. You have failed as a husband and a father. Continue to ruin your life by being a mama's boy, Obianuju said angrily as she took the baby and Temi away from the house. Immediately they got to her house. She took Temi to the hospital to see a professional who helped her overcome her challenges. Obianuju gave her all the love and support she needed. After a few weeks, Temi was much better. She focused on raising her beautiful daughter. Seeing that Ejike was unwilling to change, she moved on with her life, rented an apartment and moved in with her daughter and the maid Obianuju got for her. Obianuju and her sisters continued to show her their love and support, while Ejike continued to live under the wings of his mother. Weeks later, Temi went back to her job. Ejike made the environment hostile for her, constantly nagging and calling her a disloyal wife. Soon, the news of their marital troubles got to their boss. He summoned Ejike and Temi and asked them what exactly happened, as their issue was causing distraction at the office. Temi explained everything to him. The boss was disappointed at Ejike. "You mean he did this to you?" Temi nodded in agreement. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ejike. We would have to place you on a paternity leave. This is to help you bond with your child and learn how to be a responsible husband and father. You will have to take care of your child so you know how it is to be a parent. We are going to get feedback from your wife about your performance. If you behave properly, in the next 3 months, you will have your job back with a possibility of a salary raise. But if you perform poorly, consider this a sack, because we will no longer be accepting you." Ejike went home that day feeling ashamed. For the next 1 week, he thought about his life and what will become of it if he keeps comparing his wife to his mother. So he made up his mind and went to seek help from a professional who advised him on the right way to treat his wife and family. Ejike, realizing the gravity of the pain he caused Temi, went to his mother and told her everything. Obiageli was still defensive. She tried to justify their actions. It was that moment Ejike asked her to leave his house. He told her that unless she changes and respects their boundary, she would no longer be welcomed in their home. Obiageli went home sad and called her daughters to report Ejike, but they all took his side and supported his decision. Ejike felt bad for all that he did to Temi. He went and apologized to her, begging her to come back home, but Temi refused. Ejike was in charge of taking care of their child, and whenever Temi comes back home from work, she would ask him to go home. This continued for a couple of weeks. Ejike never stopped apologizing and sending Temi gifts. When Temi discovered that the apologies were genuine and not just because of the job, she decided to give Ejike a second chance. Ejike was so happy to have his family back. Since that day, he never treated her badly again. As a matter of fact, he worshipped the ground Temi walked on because he realized the value of true love and family. This is the end of this story. What did you take from this story? Do you think companies should start giving paternity leave also? I'd like to know your thoughts. Please leave a comment below. Let's discuss. And also, don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video as it might be useful to someone. We love and appreciate you. See you in our next video. Abena and Aqua's gifts began to manifest. It was like that of light and darkness. Though the twins were very close, their powers were different. Abena possessed the spirit of purity and peace, while Aqua possessed that of rage and vengeance. Once upon a time, in a beautiful village, there lived a beautiful couple named Kwesi and Afia. Kwesi and Afia were a very happy couple from poor homes, but suddenly they became rich after they got married. The villagers loved and respected them, but this was short-lived when Afia was unable to bear a child due to the multiple miscarriages. Soon, the villagers began to talk, accusing Afia and her husband for sacrificing their children for wealth. This discovery broke their hearts, as the villagers no longer wanted to be associated with them. One day, when Afia was coming back from the stream, some group of women began to mock her. If she hadn't sacrificed her children, they would have been the ones fetching this water. One of the women said, as the rest of them nodded in agreement. Afia went home crying. She told her husband what exactly happened, and he consoled her. This went on for a very long time, till they became fed up. Afia was tired of the humiliation. She decided to seek for help, as Kwesi kept insisting that God would give them their children at the right time. Afia went to visit a very powerful juju man who told her that it was the water goddess that would be able to help her. She went to the river as instructed by the juju man. When she got there, she sang and danced, after which the river goddess came out of the water. "What do you seek, Afia?" the river goddess said, as her voice echoed. Afia told her her story and pleaded with her to help her conceive. "Do you know what you are asking? Can you pay the price for it?" the river goddess asked as she began to laugh. "I am aware of it, and I would do anything just to have a child of my own," Afia replied. "I would give you two. They would have unique gifts, but you must never let them bathe or swim at any river," the river goddess said to Afia. Afia was surprised that that was the only condition. She thought it would require more sacrifice. The river goddess gave her an egg and asked her to bathe in the river, which she did, after which she was asked to go home. Few weeks later, Afia became pregnant. The villagers began to gossip again, but shockingly, she gave birth to a set of twins after 9 months. Afia and Kwesi were so happy. They named the children Aqua and Abena. The villagers felt bad for all the hurtful things they did and said to them, and so they brought a lot of gifts for the newborn babies to show how truly sorry they were. Afia and Kwesi forgave them and accepted their gifts. The villagers loved Abena and Aqua because they were very beautiful and lovely to play with. They were very peaceful children who found favor in the sight of everyone. But this bond was broken when the children turned 7. Abena and Aqua's gifts began to manifest. It was like that of light and darkness. Though the twins were very close, their powers were different. Abena possessed the spirit of purity and peace, while Aqua possessed that of rage and vengeance. Afia decided to restrict the children from leaving the house and playing with the villagers, but it wasn't possible. One day, when the twins snuck out of the house as usual, they saw some women in the market talking about them in a very bad manner, accusing their mother of bewitching them. Immediately, Aqua's eyes changed. The air in the atmosphere became harsh and a strange breeze appeared. All the goods in the market were destroyed and some of the villagers were badly injured. The twins quickly ran away so that no one could see them, but unluckily for them, some children saw them and told their mother, Mama, I saw Abena and Aqua running away. It seems they have done something bad," the children said as the villagers began to protest in anger, for they have never seen something of such before. "Those two witches must be sent out of this village before they kill us all," the villagers said as they marched to Kwesi's house. Afia was shocked. She apologized on their behalf, but the villagers refused. In anger, they invaded the house, but the twins ran away. The villagers caught up with them, but Aqua used her powers to escape, hoping her sister was behind her. But unknowingly, the villagers caught her, took her to the river and threw her in, as they believed she was cursed. But shockingly, Abena's body began to change. It didn't take long. She completely transformed into a mermaid. The villagers were shocked. They quickly ran away. Abena cried out for help, but no one came to rescue her. Kwesi and Afia found Aqua, and they began to search for Abena. They looked everywhere for her, but they couldn't find her until they heard the news from the villagers. Afia ran to the river, but found out that her daughter had turned into a mermaid. She begged the river goddess to set her free, but she was reminded of the vow she made several years ago. Afia was heartbroken. She cried and begged, but nothing could be done. She narrated everything that happened to Kwesi and Aqua, warning her never to visit the river or else she would forever become a mermaid like her sister. The villagers were happy because they thought they had solved half of their problem. At least, this would serve as a warning to her sister never to show her evil powers. One of the women said, as they threatened to do the same to Aqua. But unknowingly to them, Aqua was nothing like Abena. The loss of her sister made her power grow. Her rage intensified and she taught the villagers a bitter lesson. Because of her, oppression and bullying stopped in the village. When the villagers discovered that truly she was only fighting against wrongdoings, they became very sorry. They apologized to her and her parents for all the hurt they caused. They took it upon themselves to be making some sacrifices at the river in honor of Abena. Abena would swim to the river bank and accept their sacrifice, wishing for the day she would feel her sister's warm embrace again. Few weeks later, the village was attacked by some bandits. The villagers called out to Aqua, and with a single rage, the bandits were crushed. The villagers were so happy, and they celebrated Aqua. Since that day, Aqua decided to use her gifts to protect the people and the village she loved so much. But not a day passed that she did not meet her twin sister Abena, wishing she was there by her side. Aqua became a very respected person in the village, both as a blessing to the villagers and a threat to the enemies. Although she never saw her sister Abena again, but her spirit was always with her, guiding her on the right path to take. This is the end of this story. Hope you liked it. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, comment where you are watching from or what you learned. And do not forget to share this video to your loved ones. Until next time, see you.